What's up, YouTube? Welcome back. So, in this video, I want to take a look at the black tax. And this is a phrase coined by Shawn Rochester. And Shawn is a engineer and business executive and also an author. And he wrote a book entitled The Black Tax. And, it's the full title is The Black Tax, The Cost of Being Black in America. And it shows, many ways in which African Americans have borne and continue to bear financial costs rooted in racial discrimination. All right. And I just kind of want to explore this article that I ran across that sort of, talks about this topic and, gets Shawn's opinions about this. All right. So Shawn notes that Shawn notes that his book is among very few, if any, that examines the cost of being black through the lens of personal finance, right? So again, the black tax, right? That's, where we get the phrase from. Relying on research in journals of economics, law, and public policy, Shawn tallies the loss income of blacks relative to whites as a result of racial discrimination in the private marketplace, as well as in government-sponsored economic development initiatives. The costs to black individuals and families are sobering. All right. Take the example of a car purchase. Rochester looks at the research and adds it up. $1,100 more in purchase price, $500 more interest per year on an auto loan, an additional $500 more per year in auto insurance premiums, all in which would cost a black family more than $70,000 over a lifetime. Again, that black tax there, right? All right. And another thing that Shawn touches on is public programs and discriminatory laws, and the figures that are in the black tax figures that are associated with them. The list of programs from which African Americans were excluded, either explicitly or in practical terms, is long, including the land grants provided under the Homestead Act of 1862, a $1.6 trillion loss for African Americans as a whole, the Social Security Act, a $143 billion loss for African Americans as a whole, and the GI Bill of Rights, up to a $45 billion loss. By the time he adds up an estimated value of uncompensated labor through nearly 250 years of slavery and the economic deprivation of 75 years of Jim Crow, he arrives at a grand total of more than $70 trillion. So that reparations check, like, that's going to be pretty big. That's why they don't want to pay the reparations check, because they know, once they pay that check, they ain't gonna have shit. To keep it real. So Rochester worked in industry after earning his Bachelor's of Science degree in chemical engineering. He went on to earn an MBA from the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business and worked for more than a decade in executive roles in global sales and distribution, mergers and acquisitions, and strategic planning before starting his own financial education and advisory service. Good Steward, The Black Tax, is his first book in his Good Steward Financial Empowerment series. All right, so The Black Tax is his first book. So here is a quote from Shawn himself. All right. Um, let's see. I realize that there are three things that prevents us as African Americans from accumulating wealth. One is that we are lacking the knowledge to put our limited resources to their best use. The next is we do very little commerce with black businesses and service providers. The last is the massive cost of discrimination. If we had better access to information, we could actually accumulate significant resources. But if we did business with black enterprise, I'm sorry, and if we did business with black enterprise, we could create millions of jobs. But the problem is, we also have biases against ourselves and often view doing business with black enterprise, black businesses, black enterprises, as a cost or a form of charity. Hmm. I think he might be onto something with that, you know. Where it's like black people sometimes can have, anti-black sentiments and anti-black biases towards, well, black people. you know, that does happen. So here's a question that the interviewer of this in this article presented to Shawn. Why do you think there have been so few efforts to quantify the cost of racial discrimination to African Americans? And Shawn replies, I think there are two things going on. We have a tradition of focusing on the injustice and immorality of things. We have a tradition of focusing on civil rights and notions of coming together, which are important outcomes. It seems like there was an assumption that economic advancement would just follow naturally from civil rights. So economics took a back seat. And I agree with that. I think that was just like, oh, it will just, once we get all this stuff, the economic prosperity will just follow along. And I could see why folks would think that, but unfortunately, I feel like the finish line just got moved to a different place, right? A bit of a sidebar, but let's talk about just after slavery ended, right? When black people in America, were just experiencing freedom and liberation for the very first time, in the Americas, or in the United States, I'll say. Black people were behind, when it came to their economic situation, their financial situation because of slavery, right? However, I will say before slavery ended, there were some prosperous black people, probably more so up north. There were communities up north, especially in Boston. Boston had a pretty vibrant, thriving, free, community of free blacks. But after slavery, talking about the folks who went through slavery, though. So they were working, right? And I think black people, despite being behind, were making great progress, right? But unfortunately, oftentimes everyone's not happy when you're doing well, right? Especially when people feel like your prosperity is at their expense. And, people get jealous, people get the evil eye, as well. Certain anti-black sentiments, feeling like, black people are, subhuman and not human, not deserving of humanity and all that good stuff, right? So, of course, there was a certain, again, like acts where black people were excluded from, like he mentioned, like the Homestead Act, like excluded from those, but also, again, the system of Jim Crow, being excluded from certain economic opportunities, having kind of like basically, folks coming together to destroy, sabotage, and kill the efforts of Black people, right? You know, because during the Reconstruction era, Black people were making great strides in the Americas, or in the United States, right? Black people were making great strides, and again, people saw that and decided to sabotage that. You know, um, and unfortunately, there's so much evidence to support reparations. Again, I don't think reparations is going to really happen, and I've been over this before. But if it does, of course, I have no issues with that. Yeah. But again, I just don't see that happening. It's like I don't think they would create a system to exclude you from just to later on turn around and include you in. That wouldn't really make sense. But let's move on to the next and final part of this article. All right. So the question that people ask Shawn a lot is, what can we do about all this? What can we do? All right. So Shawn replies, I urge people to do what I call getting your PhD. Purchase, hire, and deposit Black. The majority of impact happens through payroll and supply chains. And then if you put deposits in a bank, in a Black financial institution, you're directly investing in Black enterprise, which is starved of capital. That's hugely powerful, and anybody can do that. So that's, one of the things that Shawn presents as a remedy to this problem. So I kind of, this article and this topic here presents an argument of Black people's economic situation from the point of, say, Black people supporting Black people, right? Black people investing in Black people hiring Black people depositing Black, right? PhD, right? So what do you guys think about this? Let me know in the comment section. Until the next video, adios and goodbye for now.